Hi, everyone. I just wanted to welcome you to this roundtable meeting. It's a pleasure to be able to share this platform with a number of different experts. And the topic being Neurodiversity Roundtable, Building a More Inclusive Future. We are recording this, and if you do not want to be recorded, just come off camera. So we're just going to introduce the panel. We have Professor Andy McDonnell, Professor of Autism Studies from Birmingham City University. He's a clinical psychologist and Director of Studio 3 Training Systems. We also have Roxanne Coleman, Director of Coleman Training and Development Limited, based in Bradford. Myself, who is a life coach, business coach, author, speaker, and martial artist. We also have Dave Gregson, an author who has experience in autism as well. Sam Munslow, ADHD specialist, well-being and leadership coach, motivational speaker, author, and the head of Blue Monkey Coaching. And Nick Blatchley is a copywriter and who has written a number of different articles and worked with the NHS on better communication for neurodiverse. So it's a great opportunity to share with you this occasion where we can answer some questions and hopefully get a better understanding of neurodiversity for a brighter future. So I'm going to ask a number of questions now for the panel.
What is neurotypical versus neurodiverse?
Now understanding that people are now understanding that it's a bit of a trip, but basically it's coming from the perspective of neurodiverse means different, not. Yeah, and neurotypical and neuroatypical are words that are sometimes used. There's a colleague of mine, Pete Warmby, who's written a book called about neurotypicality, but it's really a concept of not clustering things into a medicalized model. And that's the only clumsy way I can really explain it, Raj, from that point of view. I don't know if that's answered the question. But...
Thank you. Thank you for that, Andy. Give people the opportunity.
I was going to say, I think I massively agree with Andy, but from my perspective, I work with young adults who are all neurodivergent with an EHCP. The majority of the young people we work with present as neurotypical. So for want of a better word, is that social norm moment. And we notice there's two very differences. So when you're thinking neurotypical, neurodivergent, if someone presents as neurodivergent, we automatically change our behaviours towards them. There's a fantastic film out which actually helps with neurodivergent, and it's a young lady with Down syndrome, and it's been all over LinkedIn, and she says, you assume I can't drink a margarita, therefore I don't drink a margarita. You assume I can't learn Shakespeare, therefore I don't learn Shakespeare. It's a brilliant, brilliant film, but there's a flip side to it. And we deal with the flip side. And this is where, when people say neurodivergent, they have this stereotypical moment in their head of what someone looks like, which actually goes quite well to one of the questions that somebody's posed, which I'm sure you're going to come to. But ours, who present as neurotypical, the expectations on them are so high, because you assume they can drink a margarita, you assume they can learn Shakespeare, and actually we need to take an individual and just look at an individual. Doesn't matter whether they're neurodivergent, neurotypical, just look at that individual and support that individual in that way. So in some respects, I don't think the language matters. Sorry to put that one out there.
Okay.
It's a question.
Ellery.
Roxy, you just said that it's very interesting what you said, and I wanted to ask a question. You said about neurodivergent people, saying, you say that I can't drink a margarita, therefore I don't drink a margarita, or I can't read Shakespeare or study Shakespeare or whatever. Where does that come from? I don't understand that thinking. Maybe I've misunderstood the.
No. Yeah, there's a video, that's a short film, mini film that's been put out. If I can find the link during this, I'll pop it in the chat, but please do.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful.
It's a really great film, and it's a young lady with Down. So what we find quite often in society is if somebody presents as neurodivergent, so they present as having a learning disability, difficulty, autism. So for want of a better word, you look at them and you can tell. you automatically speak more slowly, give them time to respond and understand. It's an automatic response. We're kinder. I'm on, like I say, I'm on the flip side. I work with those that don't present in that way. They look at each other and go, well, I look like you, I look like you, I look like you. Yeah. But actually, I don't get it. So what's wrong with me? So actually, let's go back to the psychology side. I'm sure this will come up at some point. Before the age of 7, they've got it in their head, what's wrong with me? And that's in there for life at that point. And there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with them at all. But that's that social side, which separates. So like Andy was saying about the wording around neurodivergent, neurotypical, and it feels like a swear word sometimes. And why are we segregating? Sometimes we have to. It helps to have a point to start from. But yeah, so that's where that's come from. It's come from a film, which basically was for people with Down syndrome or the others that present as neurodivergent. Don't assume I can't do something, because maybe I can. Give me the chance. I think that's what it's from. And does that answer your question?
Yeah, but very much so. Thank you for that. But thank you very much. Because the reason I not riled, but you'll understand the reason. I'm sure the people in the room felt the same thing. And I was like, well, but why can't they? Well, why can't they?
Exactly that.
Yeah. That's why I said that, because but you're absolutely right. Thank you so much for explaining that. It's been really helpful. Thank you.
I think someone put a YouTube link in the chat.
I'll have a look and see.
Yeah. Could I just say, I mean, I don't have the practical experience that some of the other panelists do, but I like to think of it as that it's somewhat analogous to someone who's living in a country where they don't speak the language fluently. There's nothing at all wrong with them. They're not of lower intelligence or lower use. There's purely a communication issue. And what needs to be done is to overcome that issue.
Yeah, that's interesting, Nick. I mean, you've done some work with the NHS on communication. Maybe you can add to this at this point.
Yes,
Hi.
I mean...
Oops, sorry, go on.
Sorry. No, after you.
I'm Raj's sister, but I also am a psychiatrist and I work in learning disabilities. So obviously it's quite hard for me not to, I've got my, from my experience in my clinical work. So obviously neurodivergence doesn't have to come to see a psychiatrist. It doesn't have to, be medicalized or be in a medical model. But I guess it's just also highlighting that actually there is an overlap with some disorders, and sometimes, obviously all the people I see have a learning disability, and then trying to decipher what's due to a learning disability, maybe what's due to neurodivergence. It's very, very complicated. But at the end of the day, I think it's Roxy said, people will come and say, have they got autism? Have they got ADHD? Have they got bipolar? But at the end of the day, it's what is this person's needs? Because it'd be very different for each person. So it's always personalized care. Will a label necessarily help someone? Sometimes it can help, obviously, but the most important thing is that care is, or how you treat someone is tailored towards that specific person.
May I just respond? Sorry, respond as brief as can briefly. Going on what you've just said there and what Nick said about there's nothing wrong with them, and you're right. Actually, there is nothing wrong with them. Who's the problem with? Is it with them, or is it with myself as somebody who's delivering something I'm asking them to do, giving them a set of instructions? As a teacher, I know I've probably thought it years and years ago. As a parent, I know I've given my kids an instruction. Can you just clean the living room, dust the living room today? The thing is hanging on the wall in the cellar, and the polish is under the sink. Now I'm coming home expecting my living room cleaned, and maybe the telly has been done, but they probably used someone's coat or scarf or something. Who's the problem with there? I've given instructions that I understand. I haven't looked at the way that they learn and the way that they take instruction. So that's that individual. It really does go to that individual moment. And there's nothing wrong with them. It's me. It's that communication moment.
Fine, thank you.
I suppose, Raj, can I add something to that, Raj? It's just to come back on something. which is that we need to distinguish between a campaigning movement that came out of human rights. I worked with people with disabilities originally who were in an institution who had no choice, they were disempowered. That's part of this movement. I also worked with people with a diagnosis, and a lot of it was about understanding that as a psychologist in the early days, I would actually be sitting in a room almost like I was some kind, and I don't mean it in a bad way, Raj, your sister's here, but as a glorified doctor giving prescriptions to people, when actually I was seeing people with issues, stress, behavior. They're not broken, they're not damaged, they're just different. And the part of my work changed over the years to thinking, actually, I need to try and walk a mile in the other person's shoes. So this whole debate about neurodivergent others, for my area, it's about behavior, and it's people's view of people who look different or divergent is where part of this came from. And I think, yeah, it doesn't matter at some level about the labels, and I absolutely agree with that. But there is a notion that when people are proud of these labels, I mean, I constantly now have individuals, I can say they're friends, people with a diagnosis, academics, let's hold a perspective that, just one example, Albert Einstein, retrospectively, probably would have met the criterion for what was known as Asperger's syndrome, high-functioning autism. There are many famous people who have strengths-based skills. This is about moving away from negative labels to say that someone's different, deficient, or broken. And that's the language that neurodivergent experts have given me. We're here about saying, what are your strengths? What are your abilities? I got somebody today, I'll share this, who's got sensitivity to hearing. What it actually means is they've got super sensitive hearing. Not a problem. Yeah, they need to learn how to filter things out. But, they can hear a pin drop at night, which stops them sleeping at night. So we can accommodate that. But actually, they're incredibly gifted at listening to music at the same time. So do I say they've got an issue around sensory issues, or do I actually say this is also a strength that you have? You're different, and actually, in some ways, far better than I am.
Thank you, Andy.
And I think
strengths.
if I could add into that, I think it follows on really well, and some excellent comments there, that actually when we talk of neurodiversity and autism, neurodiversity, ADHD coexisting, people actually have skills. It is often the perception of others.
Is Dave frozen for everybody, or is it just me?
Yeah, I can hear everyone else. I think Dave's frozen.
Yeah, right.
Reason.
Okay.
This
is technically challenging, Raj. It's technically challenging, this. All right? We're getting there, though.
We're getting there. Right, I'll come back to Dave in a moment. We have a question from Catherine. And the question is, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to parents of neurodivergent children for a neurodiverse future? Who'd like to go first?
Well, I kind of do this a lot in my job, so it's a bit unfair. My main advice I give parents is that your child is different. They're not abnormal. They've got the same rights in society as anyone else. And I constantly tell people that. And actually, you've got to understand that they sometimes see the world differently from you. And that's a bit like the analogy that was used about different languages. I constantly tell parents that when I'm doing my work. It sounds a bit cheesy, but that's where I come from with it. So that's a simple answer from me.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
So I am neuro. I don't say neurodivergent because I don't like that word. I am neurodiverse, and I have a neurodiverse family. I have 4 children, and we have ensured that in our family, in our home, that nobody is ever a victim. And I would say, never make your child a victim because they are different.
Absolutely.
So that's one thing. I coach parents of neurodiverse people, and one of the first things I say is, if you're neurotypical and they're neurodiverse and you're sat opposite them on a table where you see a 6, they see a 9. And what the world does is the world says, right, you neurodiverse person who cannot see beyond your 9, come around here and see the 6. Well, that's pointless because they cannot. So I help parents to go round and see what that 9 is. And the best way to do that, the best advice I give is, when something happens, say, how is that for you? And because we have different learners, it could be, how does that feel for you? It could be, how does that look for you? Or just, how is that for you? And when they answer and say, oh, I'm feeling, you go, oh, okay, we'll go with feel for you from now on. Because if I ask, how does that feel for you? It's like, I don't know what you mean. I have no idea. That does not compute. But it looks like this, or it is like this, or it seems like this. So the language is really important, and it's learning to talk their language.
Absolutely.
The not making them a victim is a massive thing. And if I may, I've got a very brief, I'll try and be brief, example. When my 5-year-old, then 5-year-old, came home in floods of tears because he has Tourette's and he was doing a really thinky maths thing, and he ended up with everybody going, "What are you making those noises for?" as he was grunting away. We call them his Marge noises. So it's just part of our life. He has Marge noises. I sometimes get migraines. I forget everything. We all have our little isms in our family. Isms is acceptable in our family. And I could very easily, as a mom, have gone, "Oh, that's awful. They were all picking on you." But I refused to let my child be a victim. Instead, I sat back, and I am a coach. So it was easy for me. Well, it was easier for me to do this. I did have to sit on my hands, and I said, "Why do you think that's happening? Tell me more about that." And if you can't think of the right questions, then just sit quietly for a minute and let them process, because we all have solutions to our problems. The problem is parents think that they know better. And if you're neurotypical and your child is neurodiverse, then you don't know what's going on in their head. You can't climb inside and see that 6. You have to get it out of them, or that 9 rather. So I asked him, and he said, after a while, he went, "I don't think they know what Tourette's is." And I said, "Are they nasty people?" "No, they're not." And once he established, no, they're not nasty, they don't understand Tourette's, he then went, "Mommy, can you come into school and explain what Tourette's is?" And I went, "Yeah, it's no problem." Tears stopped, everything's fine, no victim. Now that's one very small example, and we can do that so much with our children.
Thank you.
It's a good
Sam.
example.
Really good example.
Yeah.
One of my favourites.
And not
Yeah. Could I?
Nick, go on.
I mean, I think as with the sensitive hearing, a lot of states that are labelled neurodivergent come with their own strengths, like Einstein, although, you know, I'm not saying that you should ignore the problems, but you should also sort of work with those strengths. I mean, one thing I've discovered recently is that a surprising number of successful authors are dyslexic. And apparently one of the things that goes with dyslexia is actually improved verbal skills and greater imagination. So, you know, and people with ADHD are often very successful entrepreneurs. Again, the problem actually drives their success. I know one person who's very much like that, who calls it her superpower.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nick, for sharing that perspective. Does anyone else want to follow on this discussion before we go to the next question?
Hi, Raj. Is it right if I chime in?
Yeah, Prem, go on.
Yeah, so I work as a neurodiversity workplace coach for an occupational health company. And yeah, we really take a focus on a strengths-based approach, really. So yeah, one thing we do try to do from the get-go is get the coachee to really think about their strengths. I think in society, like previously mentioned, there's always a tendency to see these things as deficits. So yeah, we do a range of activities to help them find their kind of core values, their strengths, their interests, and look at the challenges as something that can be addressed to allow them to kind of express their natural selves, really. So yeah, I can definitely kind of echo taking a strengths-based approach, and then that kind of helps them as well, make them kind of come around to the idea that there's nothing necessarily wrong with them. They just have differences or divergence they do, and yeah, always a good way to kind of go about it.
Brilliant, thank you, Prem. I think Roxy wants to add to this as well.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things we do, we have an expectations meeting, and one of the things we've learned over the years is I'm a parent. None of us want our children to fail ever. We just, if we could wrap them in cotton wool forever, we would. I'm not going to lie, we would. Because it's horrible to see your child hurt. But the thing we say to parents, so we watch these young people come to us, and parents have almost held they're 18, 19, 20, held their hand into the provision. And it's like, no, seriously, you need to take a step back. But we have the expectations meeting, which is expectations of the programme staff, everything. Then we send the learners off, and we have expectations with parents. And it's really, I've just seen the comment, actually, it's very difficult to observe from afar. What we do try and say, and this feels very brutal when I say it, and my first time of ever saying it, there were 3 parents in the room who had had a co-parent loss within the 10 years. And I just had to say, what would happen to your young person if you weren't here tomorrow? If you need to equip them with as many tools and skills to be able to be as independent as possible and to be able to advocate for themselves. That's a big one, is allowing them to advocate for themselves. Because as someone just said a moment ago, parents will quite happily talk about that. As Sam said, the parent will quite happily chip in for the child, because the neurotypical parent thinks they know everything. I'm one of those.
Jen, can I just add something as well? About 50% these days of families are also neurodivergent, non-neurotypical families, dyslexia, other things. And I think in my work, I've seen that. And I think it's actually quite helpful to sometimes have a broader discussion about that within families. You've got to be careful sometimes. I can say this. I remember somebody I worked with who went through a number of his traits. He was a very successful parent. Said he didn't like people. He didn't like certain noises. Routine was really important to him. But we're here to talk about my son. And as part of the process, I had to say, well, have you ever considered that it's not all genetic, but there are things in clusters that link in families? And this person looked at me and said, nope. Now, it's an example of the other extreme where he went, nope, there's no history of that in my family. And I think increasingly we're understanding that. And this includes things like the point about dyslexia. I have a son with dyslexia who's ended up being a bit of a high flyer, but he had to have a lot of encouragement, as he said, some pushing, some nurturing, a lot of meltdowns, but he ends up actually going to be working in our nuclear industry on things that go bang, which kind of frightens me. But he's kind of got through all of that to, yes, I can do this. And I think it's very hard when people sort of have a label. Now, his was dyslexia, but he still felt, he told me, he's an adult now, that he felt ashamed of the label at one point. Now, looking back, he felt like he was treated as a leper, and that was in a school that I was a governor at. So don't worry, we fixed all that in a sense, but it's that conversation that people need to have sometimes. That's all. I think this is it's really hard for people, to say, I'm celebrating my son, I'm celebrating my daughter. And one of the big things I wanted to make a point, Raj, is you often have advice. The other advice to parents is try not to listen to your extended family too much. You're from different generations, because you'll be talking Swahili sometimes. Yeah. A number of times I've heard people say, well, it's just about discipline, isn't it? These kids are just naughty. That's the thing we've got to kind of knock on the head in our work. It just really drives me crazy.
Thank you, Andy, for sharing that. Elaine, I'm going to bring you to the conversation. You made some interesting comments. Elaine, advocating for self is impossible for the majority, regardless of diagnosis. So, where are you coming from with that?
Well, a lot of people, so in my work, sorry, I've got I haven't got my normal camera on. It looks like I'm looking up my nose. Sorry about that. It's the way the camera is on this particular laptop.
You try sitting in the garden, Elaine, in the middle of nowhere. It's all right. It's okay.
What we're talking about, the advocating for self.
Yes.
So in my work as a health mentor, very few people can advocate for themselves, and I'm often asked to help people when they receive a medical diagnosis to talk with the doctor, to the doctor, about the doctor, whatever. And that's just normal people with a health diagnosis. So never mind people like my son and other people here who've got personal experience in raising an individual. So it's all very well for people to sit on the sidelines saying, oh, yes, you have to do this and do that. Try fucking doing it, as a human, excuse my French, but, for these people, it's impossible. So all these agencies, my son has been let down by so many agencies. He now self-harms. And I saw some pictures recently which absolutely horrified me. I knew that there was a challenge, but my goodness me, it's very, very difficult. There's no answer, there's no easy answer. So, yes, great find for agencies to help, but unfortunately, in our experience, most of the agencies are underfunded, they're on demand, they don't have the right people doing the right work. They have people who have no experience whatsoever. It's like people who haven't got children telling you how to bring up your child. Hello, I don't think so.
Well, thank you, Elaine, for sharing, because it's obviously you've been going through a tough time at the moment. Parents going through that. I was going to sort of pose you a question, but I think Roxy got something to say.
I was going to say, Elaine, it's a story I hear a lot and far too often.
Yeah.
I mean, when I say advocate for themselves, I mean as much as you can give them that. I mean, I'm talking about the young people we work with, which are the main outcome where we're looking for is independent, sustainable paid employment. So that's a certain type of person, neurodivergent person, that's at a certain stage and can. But the reason I set up my provision is because I've heard your story, not from you. I've heard that same story about being let down, and it's those reasons. It's resources. It's just people don't take a bespoke approach. They don't look at the individual, and they don't give them the time because they don't have that time. Quite often, schools don't really have that. There is a question in there about schools. Schools don't have that time, and they don't have the resources, and they don't always have the training. Teachers do, but the caretaker and the secretary and everything else don't, even though they see the young person. So it breaks my heart, and I don't have an answer for it. No one does have an answer today. It's
no, and it doesn't get any better. I mean, Andrew's 29 now. We had the diagnosis when he was 12, and it is hereditary in Andrew's case, but there's an awful lot where it's not hereditary, and society, toxicity, medication, food, I mean, it goes on and on, all the different things that have an impact. So there is no one answer, there is no one diagnosis, but it doesn't get any better. So all we can do is our best in trying to manage as best we can.
I'm so sorry to hear that. And if it helps, I've just had 24 young people graduate, or 21, sorry, young people graduate today from our programme. Some are going on to the second year, some are actually gaining jobs and everything else. And they've come to us with parents in a state, tearing the hair out, crying on my shoulder, and I've just given them the 2 hours it's taken to listen. Yeah. So if it helps, there are some that are gaining. I can't help the world, but I can help some.
Yeah, but there are, there are situations. Andrew's got a first class honours degree, top student at Liverpool University, John Moores Liverpool University. He was in work for a year and he got made redundant last year unexpectedly, and of course that sent him in a tailspin. He wasn't dealt with properly, and it's made the bad situation even worse. So where does he go from here now? So hey ho, it happens, and I'm just one. It's not me. I'm just a mother in all of this, but there are so many. There's thousands of people like him. And where do you go? How do you fix it? It's like putting your finger in the dike when the dam's overflowing. It's really very difficult for everybody concerned.
Elaine, can we pick up outside of this? I've got a
Sure, absolutely, yes, yeah, please do. I need to go actually. I've got an unexpected visitor, so thank you for listening. And if I can help anybody, I have set up years ago. I was on the advisory board for an Asperger college in Somerset, and I set up a branch of the National Autistic Society, and I have got a lot of experience in supporting families as a lived experience. So if I can help anybody, then let me know. I'm going to have a glass of wine now. Good night.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I was going to pose a question that Elaine sent earlier today. So how can employers be expected to support neurodiverse individuals if they don't declare their condition? Who would like to handle that one?
I'll make a couple of comments. Part of my work, I run an organisation, Raj, so we do quite a lot of things above the wire, below the wire. And one of the most common things from employers is most people know if someone's neurodivergent. They don't need a diagnostic label, right? There are countless people that you don't require them to disclose it. And there's legal nonsense around this. But actually, the often question is, what are the kinds of things that those individuals need? And they're always very similar things, although everyone's an individual. They need time. They need to be very clear that they know what the job is. They need to have some accommodations around if they're stressed, because an awful lot of these individuals get very stressed. And these are good principles in any employment with it. But it is very different as well that I've had an example recently where someone declared that they were autistic and they didn't get a job. And that's for a local authority. And it's no doubt in my mind, it was due to the declaration. Now, I advise people to declare whenever they can, but I do leave it up to their personal choice about it. But I think from employers' point of view, some of the best practices are best practice to making all workers efficient, not just the neurodiverse. You know, allowing people time and space, checking and coaching and monitoring jobs. I was just reminded of somebody years ago. She's a very famous woman with autism. I won't use her name, but she didn't sleep well at night, so she got night work. And the night work she actually got to earn some money was actually checking and condemning clothing in a clothing factory. She loved it. There was no one around apart from the night porter and one other person. And when the staff arrived in the morning, their products would be sorted into condemned, redo, and she was very good at it. She found that kind of job for her, but the job wasn't really important to her. What's important was the money she got so she could do her ice skating regularly. And I think the same thing with this around jobs and around job coaching. It is about getting people to be flexible. I mean, I run a company. Somebody said to me recently, how many neurodivergent staff do you have? I have to tell you, Raj, and probably I'm going to get into trouble now. I told the person to go forth and multiply. It's none of their business, right? Or do you want me to say it like a badge? X number of our employees have a label. Some others need accommodations. It gets to the stage where people shouldn't feel they have to disclose to their employers. In fact, the employer's job is to be a little bit more wary of that. I once went, I can't say where, but to a colleague's IT firm. And there's a stereotype about guys who work in IT. And I went into this area. There was a guy with his Lego out. There was someone else who was like, had his headphones on. There was someone else that had some very obvious traits that weren't subtle. And my colleague said, I think I've got some neurodivergent people in this team. To which I said, oh, yeah, but you've already tuned into that. And the kind of things you're doing are really good. You know, don't turn this into a kind of hero road bit. Just to get the most efficiency out of these individuals, do they need flexible working? Online over lockdown was absolutely amazing for many people I know who were trying to hold down their jobs. But to me, it's about employers doing basic accommodations, which are now becoming custom and practice. I also encourage people to go and work for small companies if they can. But that's another thing for another day, if they can. Right, where you've got a connection to the boss and the boss's boss, whoever they are.
Interesting. Thank you, Andy.
Can I say, I'd say the same thing about communicating with your staff. That obviously, if you know a person's particular needs, you adjust. But if you follow best practice, think about what you want to achieve, think about who you're addressing, plan what you need to say and stick to it, and be as precise and brief as possible without leaving out necessary information. You are going to get over to most people what needs to be communicated.
Thank you, Nick. Dave, I'm going to just come to Dave to answer the question. If anyone got their microphone on, if you could just put it off. There's some background noise at the moment. I think it might be my brother. He's got the microphone.
Thank you, Raj. Yes, I think I just cut out there, Raj, friends. So thank you very much. Yeah, just to add really with that when it comes down to neurodiverse or any such support within workplaces, if you have a safe environment, if you have confidentiality, if you have a third party, if you have open communication, neurodiverse places or places workplaces or other environments are actually more supportive for all those within. And often the cost of, an adjustment can be just first thing having a conversation, understanding, that's all, listening without judgment. And when such are put in place in such environments, they make them more supportive for all in the environments, whatever staff are going through, whether it being mental health, personal problems, family issues, money. When there's that supportive environment, and it actually says what it does, that makes a difference for all, because the actual cost of not doing so is actually worse and impacts not on just on the individuals, but ultimately on the business and the service. So thank you very much, Raj. Thank you for listening there.
So how can organizations create a more inclusive work environment then?
May I go? Is that okay? Sorry, I feel like I'm jumping in quite a lot. This is what we do. This is what we train. We go into businesses to talk about, to advocate for our young people as well, but it's about trying to make a better world for everyone. There's a lot they can do. There is a lot they can do. And just coming off the back of what the other guys were just saying as well, if a company, you need to look at every individual. So if a company can equip themselves with some neurodiversity or training or learning disability awareness training, there's a lot of companies out there do it. It just gives you a few heads up of what you're looking at. So it doesn't matter if they declare it or not, because there's so much unconscious bias out there that a lot of people won't declare it. They don't want to. And that's okay. It's all right. So having just a bit of training across the company will really help. But it is about creating that inclusive environment and that safe space and that open door policy and all of that, but looking at everybody as individuals. Treat all employees as an individual, making reasonable adjustments where it's needed, allowing all employees to be their own authentic self. That creates an inclusive employment culture. We have an analogy that we use when we're doing our inclusive employer events. Businesses are no different to your car, really. Think of your car engine. If your car wasn't being efficient, you would look at your engine. Your engine has many, many parts of different shapes, sizes, colours. They work at different speeds. They all do different things to make that engine work. Your business is no different. This goes back to where, the guys were saying that in this IT department, the Lego on the table and things like that. And it's like, yeah, I can almost guarantee half of your IT and accounts department are probably autistic. But do you know what? That's what you need. But look at those individuals. Look at what you're asking them to do. Open up. Give them the opportunity to say, do you know what? I don't learn the same way you do. Think about when you learned to drive. How many lessons did it take you to learn to drive? Took me about 12. My son is on about 50 and costing me a ruddy fortune and still hasn't passed his test. So everybody learns differently. So look at that individual and give them, some people need pictures, some people need bullet points, some people need paragraphs. I always say to my team, and anyone that knows me will know this, Damien's on the call and he'll probably be chuckling his head off at the moment. Don't send me a paragraph of information. I'll read it, but the first sentence and the last sentence is all I'll remember. The rest could be in Japanese. It doesn't make any difference. Send me it in bullet points. I'll clock it. I've read it. I can go back to it. I know where I'm going to. Give me spaces between things, because that's how I take in information. So for me, when it comes to a business, it's about looking at all the individuals and just treating them as individuals and just realizing that what makes me different makes me. I put that in the chat earlier. And, it's everybody's different. And that's what makes up this wonderful world that we live in, this sphere. We don't have to fit in a box anymore. We fit in a sphere. That's it. We've just got to succeed and, survive in this sphere. Survive and thrive.
Thank you, Roxy. Is there anyone else to add to that?
Hi, Raj. Hi, yeah. It's kind of just echoing on that. I think actually making the most of the onboarding process and making that as efficient as possible, where the line managers giving the opportunity to the employee to be able to disclose whatever they need to, really. There's certain tools such as like a do it profile or manual me, whether you've got neurodiversity or not, which can help the individual kind of reflect and think about if there's any adjustments they need to make, or even just kind of communicate any kind of differences or preferences in the way they communicate or the way they work. So just having that off the bat, and kind of just following on from that, really, having line manager to be as engaged and supportive as possible, just be a point of contact that the employee is able to kind of feel comfortable to reach out to. And I guess initially or ideally just ongoing, to have these regular checkpoints, check-in meetings, even if there are informal on a week or fortnightly basis, just to see how things are going. And I guess over time, hopefully the employee will be able to kind of feel comfortable to kind of disclose if there are certain characteristics or traits of neurodiversity that are going on as well.
Thank you for that.
I agree completely with that. I think the onboarding process is absolutely vital. Within that, that's the time for the employer to find out what will work best for the employee. Are they a visual? Are they a kinesthetic? Are they an auditory? We have different ways of learning. We have different ways of communicating. And the problem is that we often expect the employee to fit in the employer's box. Well, the employer is one. The employees are generally a lot more. It makes a lot more sense to look at the ways that the others learn and find out their way and stop expecting them to do your way. And also bear in mind, I love that, the whole point of your onboarding is the right hand then needs to speak to the left hand. So the line manager hears all of this, which often goes amiss with companies I've supported. And also it then needs to be revisited. Because I have ADHD and I have shiny thing syndrome, and I have a great way of doing things. I've got a whole host of books up there where I've gone, this is a great method for me. This works really well, and it will work for a month, and then it does not work anymore. So then it needs to be evolved. Just like with children, for a long time, you give your child, they do messy eating, then they use a spoon, and then they can use a fork, and eventually allow them to use a knife. They use plastic and then they can use glass. We evolve and we change, and that will happen as the employee becomes more comfortable and their neurodiversity evolves as well. So it's about checking in regularly.
Sam, it's interesting because I've been in management for a number of years in previous organizations, but there's a limited amount of education and training for managers to sort of function in a way that is good for employees as well as the managers. So
and just one more thing, actually, something that I've done with a company is once they found out that somebody was neurodiverse and he was autistic, they asked me to come in and coach him. But they also asked me to coach his line manager so that the two of them can communicate. And I was almost like a mediator between the two because I understood both languages. So that's another really useful thing to do, is get somebody in to coach the management team too.
Yeah. Just to echo on that, that's something we do in organisation as well, facilitated coaching between the line manager and the employee, particularly if there's a kind of bridge in the communication gap. And it's a really useful way of getting the line manager on board and getting them to have a deeper understanding of what's happening as well. So just echoing what was said there, it's a really useful way of getting the line manager to get a deeper understanding of what's going on, what their communication is, what the way they communicate their language, and also what things can kind of be put in place as well. So that's really powerful.
To go into the next question.
Just got a comment, sorry, just because I work in learning disabilities, it's like the things we're talking about are, if you're in a good learning disability service, these are all the things that you would consider: how to communicate, how does this person best understand things, shall we use visual information? So actually we should be probably doing that more with the non-learning disability but neurodiverse people. And it actually, I know of the lack of resources and services for people with autism or ADHD who don't have a learning disability. They fall through the cracks often. So it's just a lot could be learned. We just need to see people as individuals and be more open to checking how people work best. There's loads of people I've worked with, or when I was training, or now reflect that person probably was neurodiverse. They just had to work within a certain system and were viewed a certain way. And I think it's just, unfortunately, people probably don't have the confidence to say that without a label necessarily, or without a diagnosis. But it'd be much easier if we could all say, I work better this way, and hopefully your employer can listen and do reasonable adjustments without people with a diagnosis or a label.
And employers have been doing that anyway, haven't they? They've been doing like all the personality traits tests, Myers-Briggs, DISC, the colours thing that I've never understood. They do, and animals. They do all sorts of different tests to find out how to communicate more effectively. It's just taking it one step further.
It seems like that's more of a selection process as opposed to then I don't know how much people would follow through with it afterwards in terms of.
Yeah, it's shelf help, isn't it? It's that thing that you learn how to do it and you stick it up on the shelf and never look at it again. And actually for the neurodiverse, it is essential. Yeah, you're right.
Going off what you were saying, one of the things we advocate for massively, so our interns create a our learners create a one-page profile, which they can then take with them to employment to support the employer to understand their needs. It's not anything amazing, it just gives them a rough idea. So mine would be, put my information in bullet points, please. Those kind of things. Or I might need 5 minutes to walk up and down the corridor if I'm becoming overwhelmed, all those kind of things. Why do we ask, or as an employer, why do we expect our neurodivergent employees to have a one-page profile? So we encourage everybody to have that one-page profile, maybe on the link underneath their email address, which says, do you know what, my name's Roxy. If I want to put my pronouns, I do. I don't. I play netball. I've got 2 kids. I love children. I love dogs. A little thing, because what it does is opens up a rapport, a conversation, and then within that, I can put the best way to communicate with me is if my emails, maybe if I remember being part of an audience where somebody with autism stood up and she was in her 50s working for years, and she'd had crap job after crap job and been treated really badly because no one understood her, and she'd now got this amazing job, and she stood there, and I'll never forget it because she just made me absolutely belly laugh. She said, they get sick to death of the fact that nobody really understood that my emails were really blunt. They just thought they were really blunt. And she said, no, you neurotypicals use far too many words. I just use the words I need. And if that's on your one-page profile, that my emails may come across as blunt, that's because I use the right amount of words. You use too many, or whatever. That breaks down barriers, helps to build a rapport, and also you can get in there what your support needs are. Why doesn't everybody in the company have one? Why do we do this? Someone who's neurodivergent needs reasonable adjustments, etc., etc. Why do we separate them, segregate them? Which actually, Sam, goes back to the conversation you and I had prior to this call, is about, why are we separating all this stuff out? They're an individual. We all have different needs. We all have different ways of seeing things. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sophie, Sam, and Roxy, on that question.
Raj, to say something, Raj.
We get Andy, then Sophie.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Now, the only point, Raj, I want to make is that we're talking about all these things, and it's important, but actually, when you talk about coaching for people, I'm in the training industry. We need to be careful. These are not solutions. We kind of over-clinicize them. There's some very basic things here about working with lots of different neurodivergent people, is you're working with people who sometimes find things complex and confusing and stressed. So sometimes it's getting the message over. The simple things is, if your brother, your friend, somebody you knew was struggling, you would help them. You wouldn't turn it into an analytical pathway. And for me, stress is at the core of this. What would you do? In my world, we use the word meltdowns a lot. I used to hate it. Now I think it is really explanatory for people. So to me, it's the principles for organizations start from the top. The fish does rot from the head. And actually, it's about simple programs, a lot of this thing. And it's that point that was made by one of your other people as well, about it's about getting one person to connect with another person, not whole organizations connecting with everyone. You learn by experience as well if you're going to support someone who's neurodivergent. And to me, that's at the hub of it. But that's where I'm from anyway, a lot of time. And I think these things are simple but difficult to do.
Yeah, Andy. Sophie, coming back to you.
Dad wants to say something.
Dad.
Good evening, all. Well, I'm Raj Soren. I'm a retired GP. And would you believe it? I've retired in 2000 fully, and I've given up medicine altogether. And all these things, what I'm hearing now, something new for me. Because in those days, we were not involved in management. If we have any patient you send to this specialist, that's the end of it. So since then, I have not done any medicine at all. And I'm 89 last week. So what have you been doing it? I've been writing a lot of things. I've written 2 books, about one for myself and one for our own people back in India, where they came from. And even in India, I belong to indigenous people. Not many of you probably heard about it, indigenous people. Although I'm originally Indian, but I'm the original Indian. We call themselves Adivasi. And I have written a lot of things about them. So it is like a fresh breath of fresh air listening to you people. And my observation is the medicine has moved on to a long way. And even the care is, I hope, is better than that. And I've forgotten all the medicine except the paracetamol. But still, I'm doing something, writing, going back to my roots every year and try to help the people I've left behind there in educational, social, medical, even some charity work. So that's my introduction. And I'm hoping to go back to India next year, provided I survive the next year. Normally, I go in the winter. Thank you very much. And nice seeing you all.
Thank you. Yeah, because the education of GPs and doctors hopefully has evolved over the last 30 years. Some not so. There's still a lot of education that needs to be done. And so I'm going to be talking now in relation to the education. I know we're coming to the end of the hour. There's a few other questions. If you want to remain on the roundtable, you're welcome to stay with us. So how can educators better support neurodiverse students in the classroom? So I think Sam and Roxy might want to go over that one.
Yeah, I'd love to. So my background is education. I spent 22 years as a primary school teacher and then school leader. And it took me a long time to realise why I was always given the challenging children. Every single year I got the challenging children, and then it transpired that, oh, I get them because I'm like them, because I didn't know that I was neurodiverse. So how can educators better support their students? I think there are 2 strands here. One of them, the key one obviously, is the students, but the other one is the parents and how they communicate with the parents as well, which is really important. And I'm just going to touch on that one first. Parents' evening is always about reaching goals. It's always about, can they do this? Can they do that? Can they do that? I would say with parents of a neurodiverse child, don't talk as if you are talking to the parents of a neurotypical child. Change your language so that it makes sense to them and relates to their child and not to that child that they will never have. Talking about potential, they could reach their potential. If they could focus, they could try harder. As a parent of a neurodiverse or for neurodiverse, I've heard this so many times that if they worked hard, if they just applied themselves, what I wanted to hear from was, can they celebrate the achievements that they've already made? What achievements have they made? Because every child, and I spent 22 years, every child, every year, every term makes massive achievements, massive steps. Sometimes they're academic. I don't give a stuff if they're academic or not. If that child could never go out into the playground because the noise was too much, and then they were able to, or could never stay in the hall because it was too loud for them, and then they're able to, that's a huge achievement, and that needs to be celebrated. And then for me, as a parent, I would want to hear, what's my child's next steps? What's the thing that you as a parent can focus on with them to get them to their next small step? Not that big mountain of get a level whatever in SATs, because it's never going to happen. Then if we look at the children, the problem we have with focusing on children is that the structures are all in place, and they have been since post-war. So for example, at the end of every day, I, as a business owner, will write down my plan for my next day, which means I can then go and relax because I know what's coming in the morning. A teacher can support a child by doing exactly the same thing. So when you come in tomorrow, we're going to be doing these subjects. We've got this visitor coming in. We're going to be doing that and that and that. And the final bit, do you have any questions? Ask them that, so that when they go home at the end of the day, they can relax and know that I know what's happening tomorrow, which means you're less likely to have those tantrums in the morning because they know what's happening. Especially if, and when you come in tomorrow, I will need all of the pencils to be sharpened, please. So would you pop in a little bit earlier, if that's useful for them? Exam time is an absolute bugbear for me. I hate this. I have neurodiverse children who are given extra exam time. They hate exams. They cannot sit still. Why would you give them, if they can't sit still for 2 hours, why would you give them an extra half an hour because they're neurodiverse? Instead, I would say give them time out. And I tried this with my neurodiverse students and it works a treat. They just had a little thing where they just clocked in and out. They had exactly the same amount of exam time, but when they reached overwhelm, just like when I know I need a break and I go off and do something, they would go off and then they'd come back. And that worked an awful lot better. And then finally, the other one is celebrating their wins, because as we know, anybody who is neurodiverse will have special skills in some way. We've seen all the films, the films that had us stereotyping, Rain Man and you know what autism and ADHD were, which are just so damaging, but in some ways opened doors to discussions. Everybody has skills. A lot of ADHD people are incredibly successful. Oddly enough, I've written a LinkedIn post today about people like Sir Richard Branson being ADHD, Hamilton, the Formula One driver. They all have their special skills. I wonder, in school, did they get straight A's? Or were they written off? My daughter is unbelievably successful, and yet she was always told, if only you could focus and try harder. But if they'd harnessed the talents that she had, and if they'd noticed them then she would have felt successful all the way through. And the problem a lot of neurodiverse children have is they come out of the school system feeling like complete and utter failures, which means we then have to fix what they believe is broken. We know they're not broken. They don't need fixing. They're perfect as they are. And we need the teachers to start to see that. I'm going to get off my soapbox now because I could talk about this one for hours.
Sam,
I'm going to jump on your soapbox, if I may.
Please do. I'll always have somebody up there with me.
Raj, is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there has been a huge amount of money about 2-3 years ago from the government put into special educational needs. And a lot of that has gone into teacher training. And some of my students at the time were part of that training. They went on and did little video clips and were asked, actually, what did you want at school? What didn't you have? And most of them said, I just wanted to be listened to, which was quite amusing. And that actually, to be fair, that person came out of school as a troublesome, naughty kid and everything else, and they just were listened to and became wonderful. And it was all about transgender and all of that kind of thing. So train all your staff. Don't just train the teachers is my thing. Very much so. A lot of kids mask, girls mainly. Mostly it's sort of, that they're in class and they're having to behave in a particular way to fit in and to cope and not to stand out and to get their work done. So when they're out of class, that's when they let out. So you could have, I don't know, for example, I'm going to do a little bit of a stereotype. Little Johnny goes into the playground having kept it all in and been a good boy in the classroom, and in the playground he goes out and he walks the same place 4 times every single day, and he touches the same fence 3 times because that's what he's got to do just to kind of get his head sorted. Who notices that? Because the teacher thinks he's great. but actually he's not doing too well. And then his social, emotional, mental health starts to kick in. And this is where things go wrong. So that's where, for me, the training, just some basic neurodivergent awareness training for your receptionist, your cleaners, your caretaker, your playground assistants, all those kind of things really is integral to back up the tutor. So if they notice that little Johnny's just walked, do you know what? He does the same thing every single day. Tell someone, because they won't, they'll just think it's a quirk. Tell someone, because actually that could be him actually trying to stop himself from going into crisis, and it might only take one more trigger for him to end up in crisis. So that's
a good one. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you on that one, because another point, he's the good one. He's the one that would all go, he's great. Then there's little Billy, who sits really still the whole time, and he goes round and he pokes everyone and he steals the footballs and he's really naughty and he gets stood against the wall. And he stood against the wall for the whole of playtime or outside the head teacher's office, and he's not able to let off that energy that is absolutely essential, that I know I have too. I'm sitting still now, and I'm going to have to go and let off steam.
Yeah.
And if he's held against told to stand against a wall, what happens when he goes back in the classroom?
It goes boom.
It's exactly the same thing, yeah.
Absolutely. So if somebody just has that awareness and can pick it up, is a huge, for me, that's a huge thing, a minimal cost and a tiny little thing for everybody having that knowledge. And the other one, which is I won't get on my massive soapbox, I promise, but it does pick up on your point, Sam, actually, academic and vocational schools. The government is not brave enough, and they won't be in power for long enough to break our system down and build it back up, because by the time they come up, get it broken down, they'll be out of power, which makes them look dreadful, and nobody's brave enough to do that. We should have either schools where there's, I'm very lucky, my daughter went to a school where there was 136 students from reception to GCSE level. Her first school of year 7, we moved, but the first term there was 217 year 7 students. Now that gives enough to have a vocational couple of classes and an academic couple of classes. T levels, which are great, they're sort of between GCSEs and A levels, and they're very vocational. For me, I like to simplify things. For me, in schools, we should be doing GCSEs for those who like exams and actually that works for them, and T levels for those who don't like exams, can't do exams, don't want to sit still and need to do the vocational stuff. Or on the flip side, we should have a vocational school and an academic school. And I think what it's going to take is probably a couple of cities to go, do you know what, let's try this in 5 of our schools. We'll have one that's mixed, 2 separate. Somebody somewhere has got to grow a massive pair of balls and do it. But for me, that's the biggest thing that they're going to need to do.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to add one more question, and we're going to call it the end of our roundtable. This question is: how can families encourage open and understanding communication when a member is neurodiverse? So, would like to. Is it Sam? I think you were interested in that. How families encourage open understanding.
Okay, well, I can only talk of my own experience and my clients with this, and it's ensuring that you don't do that thing of assuming and labelling, so that you can't learn Shakespeare, so you don't learn Shakespeare. As soon as you do that, they won't. And if you've got 4 children and you have one who is on the spectrum in some form, is neurodiverse in some way, it's about sitting down and talking together and normalising it. In our house, it is normal to not be normal, because we are all different. It's something I did in school as well. I used to get, so stand up if you've got blue eyes, stand up if you've got brown eyes, stand up if you've got freckles, stand up if you've got this, stand up if you've got that. And we made it, and don't stand up if you're physically disabled and cannot. You know, all of those things. We all have our special differences, and it's about recognising that as a family, so that you don't have one person standing out. Is one of the bits. There's loads more I can say, but I've now forgotten the question. I'm sorry.
Don't worry. Roxy or Nick and David, anyone want to add to this before we come to a close?
Not my speciality, that one.
No, not mine.
Tell me the question again, because I could probably say.
Yeah. So the question is, how can families encourage open understanding and communication when a member is neurodiverse?
Okay. Yes, I think that is my biggest thing, is not assuming as well that a 3-year-old cannot understand when a 5-year-old is neurodiverse, because we're all quite intuitive when we allow ourselves to be. And we spoke about it all very, very openly and just made it very, very open and normal. I had a client whose family used to go into absolute meltdown. She had 4 children, and one of them could not cope with sitting through a whole film, would after a short time need to go off and just walk around for a bit. And the others used to get really, really annoyed that they had to pause the film and couldn't carry on watching it. And I said, so what do you tell them? Oh, he just needs to go for a little break. And have you told them why? And they didn't. And once they did, oddly enough, they all understood. And then they'd say, oh, do you need to have a little break? And then all of a sudden he didn't feel like he was holding everyone up. Well, that's no problem, I'll come with you. So yeah, it's normalizing. It's we are all normal with our abnormal ways. And that's not just, I'm not just talking about neurodiverse people. We are all abnormal in different ways. We're all normal in different ways. It's embracing that.
And I think open, like you say, open communication access is just key, isn't it? Willingness to understand, open communication, talking, and in a safer, healthy environments, people flourish regardless, don't they? In toxic environments, wherever, then people are less open, less accountable, and it's all about listening, understanding, isn't it? And each taking responsibility for helping others, praising the good things, isn't it? That's about it.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
If I may, hi, I'm Wendy. I've known Roxy for years, so she's going to know probably where I'm going to come from on this one. So my son had traits when he was younger, and I had someone do tests, etc., etc. He was borderline, but we just set in some things. So if he went to boarding school, if he sat on his bed with a book, or if he had a book in his hand, everyone just left him alone. So in a dormitory at night, there were pillow fights going on, all sorts of stuff, but they just left him alone because everybody understood. And we had little guidelines at home as well, that sort of thing. If he was there on his own, just leave him alone. And with Freddie, I also worked with him. So he would always interrupt people. And I would say to him, come and hold my hand, just touch my hand. Then I know that you want to say something, and I will bring you into the conversation at the right time. And we built up all these little systems. He's now an officer in the army, working in with helicopters in something that needs real detail, real planning, really specific information at the right time. And he's just flourished in that situation. And then my daughter is on Camp America at the moment, number 3. So I have 4 too, Sam. And number 3, she's just got an award from the camp for being consistent with working with young people, the littlies who have autism. So I think that when you are working with somebody in your family, and even I stand there now and I just sit there and go, right, I've got sensory overload. Everybody just shut up and go away and leave me alone. And we normalize it, that it's all right to say that and everybody has to respect that. Trouble is I do it at work sometimes as well, which nobody really gets.
Yeah, but you'll teach them to normalize it. Keep going. Keep doing it.
Exactly. But it's about, and I think that I think the joy in our family has been because we worked with Freddie, and exactly what you said, Sam. If Freddie, I would have to say to him, right, we're going to leave the house at 9 o'clock. You need to have this, you need to have that, and everything else. He would be in the car at 9 o'clock, exactly with everything that we needed. And once the girls were all faffing around, and me, I include myself in that, we would say, it's all right, Freddie, you can wait in the car. We're just getting ready to go. And then it was also about breaking things down for him as well. So it wasn't just about doing everything to make Freddie comfortable. It was also to make him understand how other people operated, so that if people were late, it was okay. As long as he was okay and he was on time, then that's fine. And it's about that mutual respect of everybody. Yeah, I think it's worked, but it is really difficult to work on that as a family and just get that balance. Of course, water fights in the garden always take the stress out of everything.
It is difficult. It's all about communication. It's completely all about communication, and it's about listening. And when we can listen to somebody and not own what they're saying, so something that another great tool when you have a family with somebody who is neurodiverse, and we have different neurodiverse issues going on as well. So as Wendy says, you've got one who is absolutely on time and another one that's always late, and they butt against each other. And it's about recognizing, oh yeah, that's his things, that's his things. But the communication, we made a rule that when we talk, we say, I feel, I think, I, never you. Because
Absolutely.
if it's blame. Yeah. If it's I, it's how I. So I'm feeling a little bit anxious at the moment that we're so late, not you're making me late. And those very small tips like that will just get the communication so much less aggressive. There's no blame, there's no judgment, there's complete ownership of how I feel and how I am. And I love the touch you on the arm thing, on the hand thing, because I remember my children used to come and put their hands on my shoulder to say, I want to interrupt you. And I'd just go, yes, I know, I'll be there in a minute. Love that, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, for sharing, and congratulations to the children for getting those awards and doing some really important jobs for society, which is fantastic. So I'm going to say thank you for all those that joined us this evening. Hopefully you've enjoyed the format, trying to create a safe space of knowledge and sharing lots of different ideas from different perspectives for those who are experts in the field. So unfortunately, Andy had to leave. So we'd like to thank Andy McDonnell for his perspective and sharing his ideas. Roxanne Coleman from Bradford and Coleman Training. We have Dave Gregson sharing his perspective as an author and his experience. Sam Munslow, who has a vast range of experiences, ADHD, well-being and leadership coaching, as well as being an author. So if you want to connect with any of these, then by all means get hold of myself. And Nick, thank you, sir, actually, in terms of copywriting. And it's also yourselves in terms of sharing your thoughts and posing questions. Hopefully you can join us on future occasions when we have similar topics, but maybe delve into different aspects of autism, ADHD, or a whole variety of other topics. They will be recorded. I'll send you a copy of the recording and maybe a feedback form.
Thank you very much for organising this, Raj. Great idea.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much, Raj. And thank you to everybody who attended. An entirely positive session.
Yeah.
A breath of fresh air and uplifting. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, I'll keep you posted on different events, and whoever is able to join us, then you're very welcome. Have an enjoyable evening, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Raj.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for joining this roundtable series. If you did enjoy it, do subscribe and share. See you soon. Take care.